60 years since the first moonwalk, now it's private enterprise stepping out into space.
Here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
The moment the first human being who is not a professional astronaut emerged into the darkness of space. Good evening. Hundreds of miles above Earth, a bit of history has been made with the first ever privately funded spacewalk. Until recently, it's been governments which have backed space exploration. But the tech entrepreneur Jared Isaacman teamed up with Elon Musk's SpaceX to finance the groundbreaking venture. And this is the image of Mr. Isaacman emerging from the spacecraft, silhouetted against a spectacular view of Earth. Here's our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
Historic words for an historic moment. Out comes the first private sector astronaut to walk in space. Silhouetted in Earth's orbit, billionaire Jared Isaacman paid millions of dollars for this experience. He remains partly in the capsule, so more baby steps than a walk in space, but a chance to move around in the newly developed spacesuit to test its mobility.
The entire operation end-to-end is 2 hours, so we just got to kind of see how everything progresses through it. But we don't need very long out there, and frankly, other than the test matrix, we're not building structures on the International Space Station or repairing anything. So as soon as we get the data that we have, we'll cycle another crew member in and out.
That other crew member is mission specialist Sarah Gillis. It's her first time in space, and she's already making history, standing outside the Dragon capsule. Most crewed spacecraft have an airlock, which is a sealed door between the vacuum of space and the rest of the spacecraft. Normally, it's depressurized when astronauts go in and out. But Dragon doesn't have an airlock, so the entire craft has to be depressurized. The non-spacewalking astronauts have to be fully suited up and strapped into their chairs. And extra nitrogen and oxygen have to be added to repressurize the capsule when the spacewalk is over. The astronauts blasted off on Tuesday, going further into space since the Apollo moon missions of the 1960s and 70s. The spacecraft reached a maximum altitude of 870 miles above the Earth. That's nearly 3.5 times the distance to the International Space Station, which is 250 miles. Its orbit took it through a region of space that's higher in radiation, called the Van Allen belt, which starts at about 600 miles. But the astronauts were safe inside their spacecraft. The vessel then came below the radiation belt to 435 miles, so the astronauts could carry out their spacewalk safely.
Until now, every single spacewalk that's happened has been professional astronauts through a government agency, either the Soviets or the Americans, the Russians these days. And so to have the first one that's done commercially is a big step forward for the commercial space sector, and it's going to push the boundaries of what they can do, and it will extend their capabilities, and we're likely to see many more of these in the future.
It was 60 years ago that Alexei Leonov became the first person to walk in space. Since then, it's only been astronauts working for government space agencies to have done this. Until now, this is the first ever private sector crew to have walked in space. The aim is to reduce costs so that space travel can become more commonplace and humans can have a long-term presence on the moon and possibly even on Mars.
Rather than just stepping out of a spacecraft, next time we might be stepping onto the surface of the moon. We might be building research bases and places for people to live for extended periods of time on the moon. You know, everything is incremental, but there's real forward momentum gaining now.
The historic spacewalk now over, and so many firsts already achieved, the crew's attention turns to carrying out experiments before beginning their journey home in 2 days' time. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
And Palab is with me. Palab, lots of people very excited by this. Are we entering a new era of space exploration?
It is a new era, and I'm excited too. 50 years ago, 12 men landed on the moon, and then nothing, not a lot happened. But that rush is back on, and it was triggered by China announcing that it wanted to see an astronaut on the moon. So all of a sudden it became about geopolitics, of dominance in space, of national security. So after decades of not caring, US Congress suddenly started pouring money into it. And other nations have their interest in Europe and Asia. And if you add to that the private sector that's getting bolder and bolder, driving down the costs of space travel, all taken together, we will get back to the moon, we'll get there often, and we're likely to stay.
OK, thank you very much.